Hi everyone, and welcome to lesson 15 of Atomic Structure here with Miss Burkers. As always, before we start the lesson, I want you to make sure that you have all the equipment you need. So your paper or your booklet, whatever you're going to do your writing on, as well as a black or blue pen and a feedback color pen, or whatever you're going to do your writing with. Make sure that you've also done any previous lessons because they'll build up to this one. So if you haven't done the previous lessons, that'll make this one a lot harder. So as that's all ready to go and any distractions such as your cell phones are put away, I would like you to have a look at these do now questions. There's 8 questions there. I would like you to write down an answer for all of them. So pause the video, do that now. We'll go over the answers in a minute. So now making sure you have your feedback color pen, and we'll add some of the feedback of the correct answers. So 3 examples of everyday mixtures. There are all kinds of examples that you could do here. The 3 that we did talk about last lesson were blood, being a mixture of various cells, plasma, as well as other molecules. Pen ink, being a mixture, and rock salt. If you have any other mixtures written down, it's probably all right. You might want to double check with your teacher if you're not sure. A substance that is dissolved in a solvent is called the solute. So that, for example, would be the sugar. If you put sugar in your tea, for example, the sugar will dissolve. Sugar is the solute. A small RF value means about the solubility of the ink. That means it is not very soluble. Because it will not move very far, and so it won't be dissolved well in the liquid. Elements are made up of all the same type of atom. Mixtures are made up of more than one type of substance or multiple types of substances. The process when it changes from a liquid to a gas, that would be boiling. If you've written down evaporation, that would be correct as well, but I would like you to change it to boiling, as boiling is the better answer. The point when a liquid substance changes from a liquid to a gas, that would be the boiling point, which is always a temperature, usually in degrees Celsius. When it changes from a gas to a liquid, that is condensing. And the condensing also happens at the boiling point. That's the same temperature. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about mixtures and different ways of separating mixtures. So we already know that some mixtures occur naturally in the world. There are lots of different mixtures. When we have a mixture, we know it is not only one type of atom, but many types, more than one type of substance. But sometimes the individual substances they are made from are more useful on their own. So if you have a mixture of salt and sand, for example, sometimes you don't need the sand, you just need the salt. And so we need to separate those to use those bits. So we can use various techniques or various methods to separate these mixtures depending on the substances they're made from. So for example, rock salt, which we talked about last lesson, is a mixture of sand or rocks and sodium chloride, which is everyday table salt. So it's something we place on the road to make it safer to go on. And so we'll look at how to separate those from each other. So because we can't do the practical here, there is a video which may talk about it, and if not, go back and watch the video in the last lesson, which used rock salt as an example. After that video, hopefully you'll be able to see that the substance left behind on the filter paper or in the funnel was the sand, because it was not soluble in the water. Whereas the substance that would be found in the filtrate, remember the filtrate is what goes through the filter. And that would be the salt, because the salt will dissolve in the water and will therefore be able to go through the filter. So why the substance was left behind in the filter paper, that's because it won't dissolve in water. This is something that you could do at home if you wanted to. You could use a piece of kitchen towel or as instead of a filter paper, and just try to filter it through that. So next, what you would need to do in order to get the salt fully back is leave it to evaporate. This is something you could do at home as well. I wouldn't heat it up at home. Please don't do that. But you could just leave it sitting on a sunny windowsill for a while. It might take several days, but you will end up with the water evaporating out and the salt being left behind. So why does the water evaporate but the salt does not? I would like you to think about that for a moment and then come back and answer it. So hopefully after a chance of thinking about it and writing down your answer, you have something along the lines of the fact that the salt has a higher boiling point than water. And water is able to evaporate into the air just at room temperature, but salt will not be able to do that. So, something we would try to do if we were in class would be very hard to do at home will be crystallization. So most of the time you end up, if you just let it evaporate, you would end up with just a thin layer of salt along the bottom and it would be very powdery. However, if you were to heat it up first for a bit and leave it in a special evaporating dish, you would be able to get crystals. And so it would look more like the salt that you get in large, so if you have the fancy salt from the shops where it's in the large rock crystals, it would look more like that. This is something that you would have a hard time doing at home, and so it's not something that I would suggest you do. So that would be filtration and evaporation would be two ways to separate out from a mixture. Another way to separate out from the mixture is distillation. So this is usually used for two liquids, two what we call miscible liquids. Now, miscible means simply that they can be mixed easily. If you've ever tried to mix, for example, oil and water together, they do not mix easily, and it's very easy to just let them sit for a minute, and you'll see the oil will separate out from the water and it'll form a layer on the top. Whereas two liquids that would mix easily would be, for example, your squash and your water. Once you have your squash mixed into your water, it's nearly impossible to take it out. One way that you could do that, however, would be with a distillation apparatus. So, if, for example, your mixture is made from only soluble substances, soluble meaning, remember, that they will dissolve, you can't do filtration. So we need to look at the properties which would make it more suitable. So we need to use a different property that we could use to separate it. So one common property that varies are the melting and boiling points. So this is something that very commonly changes. So no two substances have the same melting and boiling points. So if you heat the mixture gradually, first is the thing with the lower boiling point will boil off, and then something with the higher boiling point will boil off, which would allow us to separate them. So I would like, because this isn't one we could do here, there's 3 videos here that you're able to watch that goes through that. So watch these videos, take notes, and write down any questions you have so you can send them to your teacher. Once you've finished those videos, what I'd like you to do is give a try to this knowledge and application check. So there's 9 questions. Pause the video, give them a go, and we'll go over the answers in a minute. So hopefully now you've had the answers, had a chance to write in all the answers. If not, pause the video and give yourself some more time. And now we'll go through the answers. So a solute and a solvent form a solution. The process that separates sand from salt is filtration. Why sand can be separated from salt? Because they have different solubilities. Why water and ethanol can be separated? Because they have different boiling points. Two liquids that mix easily, this will be miscible. The process by which liquids change to gas, this is boiling or evaporation. The process where substances are separating according to their boiling points, this is distillation. The point at which something changes from a liquid to a gas is this boiling point. And last but not least, an experiment that could be used to remove the salt from seawater, including the scientific names of any of the processes involved. So something you could do, if you're looking to get just the salt, is you would boil the water to evaporate the water leaving the salt behind. That's one way you could do it. You could also distill the salt water to have only pure water. If you wanted to take the water out, then you would use distillation. If you just wanted to get the salt off, you would just boil the water off of the salt. So any questions about that, email your teacher and we'll move on to the next part of the lesson. Now we're going to look at a specific type of distillation called fractional distillation. So as you hopefully remember from maths class, fractions are a part of a whole. So fractional distillation is when you split a mixture into fractions or parts. So it's usually used when there's a mixture of multiple different things, not just two separate things. So as we were saying before, that mixtures can be separated depending on their properties. We've already talked about the properties of solubility, of melting point, and of things like that. But so here, we're looking at another form of melting point. So that different substances have different boiling temperatures or boiling points. And so by evaporating everything into a gas, so all of your liquid turns to gas. And if you slowly cool them down, the first things to condense have the highest boiling point. We do it this way around because it's easier to collect the liquids coming off than a gas evaporating. So if we're collecting the liquid coming off, then we know we can put that separately, and then we can cool it down a little bit more, and then we have a different liquid coming off. This is especially used in crude oil. So crude oil is a fossil fuel that's pumped from the ground. It's a mixture of differently sized hydrocarbons. You'll learn more about hydrocarbons in year 11, but they are molecules made of hydrogen, hence the hydro, and carbon, hence the carbon, hydrocarbon. So it is a mixture of various different molecules, up to 30, 40 different molecules, all with a slightly different boiling point. So that relationship is between the size and the boiling point. So as the size gets bigger, the boiling point increases as well. So if we're going back to this idea here of all liquids turn to gas, the first to condense have the highest boiling points, then if we turn this crude oil, the black stuff that comes from the ground, all into a liquid and then slowly, or all into a gas and slowly cool it down, the first gas that settles out will be the longest hydrocarbon. So the smallest hydrocarbon will evaporate first. So this is, if you're doing it in a classroom, is this section, which you can look a little bit more in from here and watch the video. But unfortunately, we won't be able to do that now, but we will talk about what it happens on a larger scale. So this is what happens in a distillery where they distill hydrocarbons. So a large scale. So what goes in, so into the bottom here, they pump in crude oil. So it all evaporates. So we have one gas. So this bottom section is closest, this bottom section here is closest to the heat. And so it is so it has the highest temperature. So the longest hydrocarbons come off as a liquid here. And then the gases are able to travel up, and then here it's a little bit cooler, but it's still quite hot. And so the next section of the next longest hydrocarbons will come off here as a liquid because it's cool enough here now that it's the gas is turned into a liquid. That's that. And then as we go up each step, it gets a little bit cooler. And so different hydrocarbons will condense until we get to the top where it's the coolest. And so all we have left are the shortest hydrocarbons, which we are then able to collect, some of them just as a natural gas. So what you need to know is that we go and we evaporate all of the crude oil and we're able to collect it because the different fractions or the different substances have different melting points. So the source of the role of the heat source, we have the heat source to melt, sorry, not to melt, to evaporate all of the crude oil. The role of the condenser is to turn the gas back to a liquid. So when we use in the science lab, for the one we weren't able to do, but we would use a heating element instead of a Bunsen burner because crude oil is very flammable. So it's a safety reason. So the fractioning column and the glass beads, that is to ensure that only that fraction is coming off. So this is from the video, hopefully you've seen it from there, how that works and the importance of that. And why distillation is unsuitable for separating substances that have similar boiling points, because it's harder to distinguish, it's harder to control. And we'll still have some mixing. So now that we've talked about all of those different types, there are 5 examples here And I'd like you to choose which of the 5 separation techniques would work best for each. Pause the video, give it a go, and we'll go over the answers in a minute. And here are the answers that you should have. So when we talk about a precipitate, in this example here of calcium, so that is a solid that is insoluble. So when we have that solid in a liquid or something that is insoluble, we can just simply filter that out. For something that we want to end up being dissolved into water, or even something that we need strengthened, crystallization would be the key thing there. The hint in the third one here is 3 different alcohols. If you have more than 2 different things you mix, then it needs to be that fractional something so that you have that opportunity to get all 3 things separately. The paint from a car, again, any kind of colors or something, we would do chromatography. And here, because we have 2 simple things with different boiling points, we could just use simple distillation to separate those 2 things. So now that we've had a good chance to go through all of the methods of separating mixtures, I would like you to go through these last knowledge check, these last 9 questions. So pause the video, give them a go, and we'll go over the answers in a minute. So the property that is used to separate crude oil, the property of crude oil that we use here is the different boiling points. Yes, we do use fractional distillation to separate it, but you need to read the question carefully. How are the fractions initially separated? They're separated by boiling point. At different temperatures. Why do the fractions separate along the column? Because each section is a different temperature. The role of the glass beads in the column is to ensure less mixing. The role of the condenser is to turn it into a liquid. The force between molecules is the intermolecular force. This came from several lessons ago, but it's a retrieval practice coming in. Volatile means it evaporates or it turns to a gas easily. The elements used to make a hydrocarbon, we have hydrogen and carbon. Last but not least, why is fractional distillation of crude oil such an important process? The products are used very widely around the world as fuels, as to make plastics, to do so many things that we use on our everyday life. We need those products. We need to be able to separate them so that we can use those products. So that's the end of this booklet. Well done on making it to the end. If you have any questions, remember you can always email your teachers to ask them for help. And don't forget to do any quizzes or anything that your teacher has set.